South African government and its private sector partners have released a risk assessment report on terrorist financing for non-profit organizations. The report aims to deal with some of the loopholes in NGO financing to ensure that the sector complies with the Financial Action Task Force global standards. Now, their purpose is to combat money laundering and terrorist financing. To discuss this new report and the funding of the NPO sector, I am joined now by Hendrietta Bogopane-Zulu, who is the Deputy Minister of Social Development. Deputy Minister, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. Firstly, what were the most significant findings of the terrorist financing risk assessment in South Africa's NPO sector? And how do they contribute to our understanding of this sector's vulnerabilities?
Firstly, let me just thank Newzroom Afrika for giving us the opportunity. Amongst the findings, which is what the question I hope I understood, what it showed us, it's the vulnerability of NPOs in terms of limited available financing. The risk report showed us that how internationally funded NPOs can be at risk of receiving money without knowing where the money comes from, and that is obviously also, increases because we have limited funding as we get the budget cuts. It also showed us what is it that we as government can do, because we need to understand that FATF it has 40 members, and as South Africa and an international country, we also are a member of FATF, and as DSD, working with all of the different entities like the Financial Intelligence Center, your South African Revenue Services, Social Development. In that report, which is an international document, you have a section called what we call it is recommendation number 8 of the international funding standards. And this recommendation is necessitated obviously by the fact that you'd be all aware that South Africa is grey listed. And amongst the things, grey listing means that, it's going to be harder and more expensive for us to get investors, to do business. And now that particular recommendation 8 talks to nothing but NPO funding, NPO's vulnerability, and our responsibility as the Department of Social Development, as the registrar of NPOs, to begin to roll out a campaign. In doing that, also, I think we got credit for the fact that we have amended the law in line with international standards. So those are like basic steps, and us allowing ourselves as a country to be evaluated by FATF and listening to the recommendations, and as a department beginning to implement. As I said, we started with the law, we amended the NPO as well as the Fundraising Act so that we comply. As DSD will be launching in June our comprehensive IT system, so that NPOs don't, today they come to DSD, they go to SARS, they go to where. So the system is going to be a one integrated system so that they are able to apply, we are able to assess. But we've also increased the NPO unit's capacity, where we increased because now we need to have financial experts within the NPO sector, which is what one of the recommendations under Recommendation 8 is, because NPOs submit their annual reports in terms of financial audited statements and narrative, and we have experts that look at the narrative, but then the finances becomes a challenge. So we've added that so that the money can be linked to the activity. The report also showed us as government that one of the things we need to also improve is what we call data management system and reporting. So we like 50% compliance and 50% not. And the 50% that is outstanding, firstly, it's us increasing awareness raising, because the report has raised that we need to increase our outreach to explain non-compliance, but at the same time educate NPOs on financial management and the importance of them being alert. What is good that came out of the report for South Africa was that at least our NPOs, we have more than 200,000 plus NPOs that are registered with the Department of Social Development. We, at least our NPOs, which is the biggest, are not necessarily at high risk. So we were assisted to understand how to mitigate risk in terms of NPOs. And I want to say thank you a lot to the NPOs, and that we just need to assist here, there. But it gave the country a one step out of the grey listing, which we all need because we need a functioning economy, but we also acknowledge the very, very important role NPOs actually plays.
I want to touch on aspects that you also alluded to in your opening remarks, to also ask what measures are being proposed to really address the specific risks identified in this particular assessment, particularly for NPOs at a higher risk of terrorist financing.
The first one is that what we are putting in place, firstly, is our high-risk NPOs. Now that the report has been launched, which we did with FATF and FIC and SARS and ourselves, it's for us to popularize the report. One is for us to actually do a specific outreach to the sectors within the NPO that is actually more vulnerable. Your church, for example, your internationally funded NPOs, but also NPOs that are funded internationally to fund other NPOs in the country. So we need to be able to profile those and begin to map out that, because those are the others. So there's three sectors that we need to deal with. It's the church, it's the internationally funded NPOs, and it is NPOs that receive international funding and fund other NPOs in the country. And the fourth one that we are doing is also to acknowledge community-based organizations, because the more local it is, the more they are at risk of terror funding, because they won't be asking the right questions. They are likely in rural areas. I walk in, I donate so much, and then I need half of that back in another way. So those are the things that we are doing. We have been rolling out, and I think we've been to Newzroom Afrika for a while, where we have been rolling out Know Your NPO Status, a campaign, including different sectors. So that is now going to be intensified, and we will also be sectorizing. Like, we're going to start with those that we call principal recipients that receive international funding and fund others, but also that operate internationally, whether it's on disaster, whether it's on religious purposes, whether it's on, we need to focus on those. Because, yeah, if I can make a simple example, somebody buys blankets because there's a disaster in country B, and an NPO in South Africa donates blankets to be sent to country B. And when the blankets arrive in country B from NPO A in South Africa, those blankets get sold, and then the money, the proceeds of the selling of the blankets then goes into the hands of wrong organizations. Because you have a disaster, you have a contact, you have an organization, you are assisting. So that is basically some of the things that we will be educating NPOs who are playing in specific sectors.
So how does the collaboration between the government, its partners, the public, and also the private sector organizations and NPOs facilitate a more comprehensive approach to really address terrorist financing and also the risks within the NPO sector?
The first thing is that we are increasing due diligence. Now, let me make a particular example. We've got private sector-based foundations, for example. And what they would do, which is what came out of the report, which we agree with, a company A would have a foundation, and then the foundation will then be funding NPOs. But when they do their due diligence, they don't involve social development in that particular step. The foundation takes a decision we are going to fund NPOA, but they don't come to us to say social development as the registrar of NPOs. Is NPOA compliant with the required prescripts of the law? They don't do that. So one of the things is to engage with the private sector to say, look, all of the foundations that are under private companies, their focus would, for example, be, I'm going to get my tax rebate, I'm going to get a Section 18A certificate so I can give whoever my money, and then I'm more worried about my BBBEE status going as well as my rebates. But now we are saying it's not going to happen anymore. In the different steps before you fund an NPO, you must, it's no longer a maybe, you must, as a private sector foundation, clear that particular NPO with social development, including what would be, it would be just, we clear the name of the organization, but we don't clear the office bearers. So now you must request that we provide with to you even the members of the board of that NPO. So it's no longer a negotiable. We are not negotiating because we all want to get out of the grey listing. We all want to create the jobs. We all want an economy that's functioning. And the biggest gap is within the NPO space. So there is one of the things that we are correcting with the private sector and its foundations.
Let me thank you for your time. That's our guest, Deputy Minister, Dr. Bogopane-Zulu, on the critical topic of the terrorist financing risks, especially within South Africa's non-profit sector.